right, we're starting with 1.3. This is the first part of 1.3, and it's solving absolute value equations. And one of the things that we really need to focus on is that you've got to isolate the absolute value first. Then after you isolate the absolute value, you're going to write two equations. All right, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight the absolute value just so that we can focus on isolating that, just like it was its own little variable. So I'm going to highlight, that's my absolute value part. So when I say isolated, that means we're basically going to solve for that absolute value. And I'm going to start, to get this by itself, I'm going to start by subtracting 4 from both sides. So I have 3 times the absolute value of x minus 2 equals 10 minus 4 is 6. And again, I'm isolating that absolute value so I can get it by itself. So in order to get that by itself, if you look at that as an entire unit, then I'm going to divide by 3. And then I've got the absolute value of x minus 2 equals 6 divided by 3 is 2. Now I'm finally at the point where I have the absolute value by itself. That was the first step. The second step then is to write two equations. The first equation is going to be the absolute, whatever's inside the absolute value equal to whatever's on the right hand side. The second equation is going to be whatever's inside the absolute value equal to the opposite of what's on the left hand side. So then we solve each of these. So I have plus 2, and I have x equals 4. Over here I add 2, and I have x equals 0. And those are both answers that'll make the absolute value true. Now it's always a good idea to go ahead and plug it back into the original to see if it works. And we don't have to do it, write it out. We can just plug it in. If I take 4 and plug it in for x, 4 minus 2 is 2. The absolute value of 2 is 2. 2 times 3 is 6. 6 plus 4 is 10, so that works. If I plug in the 0 and put it in the absolute value, 0 minus 2 is negative 2. The absolute value of negative 2 is positive 2. 2 times 3 is 6, and 6 and 4 is 10. So both of those work. So at least take a moment when you get your answer and plug it back in and make sure that they both work. All right, next one. First, I'm going to figure out what my absolute value is and focus on isolating that just like it was a variable. And remember, when you're doing notes, make sure you know that you can pause, rewind. Make sure you're writing it down as we go and not just watching, because the process of writing is going to help with the learning process. Okay, so to isolate that, first I'm going to add 6 to both sides. So negative 4 times the absolute value of 2x minus 3 equals negative 10 and 6 is negative 4. I'm going to isolate. And you can do this too. Go ahead and highlight it so that you focus on what it is you're trying to get to. Okay, and you're treating it like its own little variable. So I'm going to divide by negative 4 to get rid of the negative 4 over there. That leaves me with the absolute value of 2x minus 3 equals positive 1. Okay, and now I've got the absolute value by itself. Once you've isolated the absolute value, then you make two equations. My first equation is going to be whatever's inside the absolute value, so that's the 2x minus 3 equal to whatever's on the right hand side. The second equation is whatever's inside the absolute value equal to the opposite of whatever's on the left hand side, so that's going to be negative 1. And then you solve for x. Add 3, 2x equals 4, divide by 2, and x equals 2. Add 3, so you have 2x equals 2, 3 and negative 1 is 2, divide by 2, and x equals 1. And both of those are answers that will make that true. Okay, we're going to try one more. All right. And again, we're trying to isolate the absolute value. And you can't write your equations until you have the absolute value all by itself. So I'm going to add 8 to both sides. So I have negative 5 times the absolute value of x plus 6 equals 30. I'm going to divide by negative 5. So the absolute value of x plus 6 equals negative 6. Okay, and I've isolated this, but we have a problem. Because the absolute value of anything, whatever's inside of here, the absolute value of it cannot be a negative 6. Okay, now you can't make this determination until you have the absolute value by itself. But this is going to be no solution. And what I want to remind you is, whatever's in here, the result must be positive. But be careful that you don't make that determination until the end. Like in number 2, our original equation was a negative 10. But when we got the absolute value by itself, it equaled a positive number, so we were okay. So wait till you've isolated the absolute value. And if the isolated absolute value is a negative number, then it's no solution. And that's the end of part 1.